What happens when a 17,000-ton nuclear-powered submarine carrying 24 cruise missiles, 8 torpedo missiles, and multiple anti-submarine rockets explodes underwater? The deadliest peacetime submarine accident of all time that claims over 100 lives and sends literal shockwaves all across the world. That's what happens. A few months ago, the world watched in horror as a human-occupied submersible called the Titan imploded in the North Atlantic Ocean. All 5 passengers on board were killed. While this incident was one of the most notable marine tragedies of our time, it was nothing compared to the incident we're talking about today. Over 20 years ago, the Russian K-141 Kursk tragically sank in the icy waters of the Barents Sea in the Arctic Ocean after an unexpected series of explosions ripped through the nuclear-powered submarine. In this video, we'll explore how negligence, poor safety measures, and a deadly torpedo malfunction triggered the massive explosion that sent the Kursk to the bottom of the sea. The unsinkable. The Kursk was the pride of the Russian Navy. The 508-feet-long vessel weighed nearly 17,000 tons, and it was powered by 2 nuclear-powered reactors. These reactors gave the Kursk the ability to dive up to 3,000 feet underwater and still maintain a top speed of 35 miles per hour. It was also one of the first submarines to have a double hull. The outer shell, called the superstructure, was made of steel and had a distinctive oval shape. The Kursk's inner hull was also made of steel, and it was separated from the superstructure by a space of 7 to 12 feet. This space housed 1,000 miles of wiring, hydraulic tubing, and piping. It also contained 24 cruise missiles enclosed in their ready-to-launch tubes. Technically, the superstructure could withstand a direct hit by a conventional enemy torpedo. Even if the outer shell were to implode after absorbing the impact of an enemy torpedo, the inner hull was robust enough to protect the crew and all the vital equipment on board. When running, the Kursk could outspeed any nuclear attack submarine in the world. When hiding, it could lie still and silent for hundreds of days, defying all forms of detection. As a testament to its power and resilience, the Kursk's design team dubbed it the unsinkable. Little did they know that something unthinkable would ultimately result in the destruction of the unsinkable. The ultimate aircraft killer, the Kursk was created with one purpose in mind: to hunt and sink aircraft carriers. The Soviet Union's biggest fear during the Cold War was the US Navy's ever-expanding fleet of aircraft carriers. The Soviets saw the American carriers as deadly double-edged swords. They believed that the carriers could be used to launch nuclear airstrikes in the heartlands of Russia. They could also be used to hunt down and destroy the Soviet Union's own nuclear ballistic missile fleet. Thus, the USSR spent enormous sums on weapon systems meant to hunt down American carriers in wartime. The Kursk was the culmination of these Soviet-era investments. This nuclear-powered boat could carry huge missiles, twice the size of the missiles that an American destroyer could carry. Each submarine in the anti-class carried 24 P-700 Granite cruise missiles and 8 torpedoes. These could travel at the speed of sound at sea level and reach targets as far as 388 miles away. Back in the late 1990s, only the US Navy's Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines could match the Kursk's missile and torpedo-carrying capacity. That's why the Kursk was seen as the ultimate symbol of Russian naval power when it was launched in 1994. Summer X days leading up to the disaster. Demonstrations of military capabilities have always been a dangerous game. The Russian Navy decided to play this game in the grandest of fashion in August 2000. The name of the game was Summer X. It was the biggest naval exercise in the modern Russian Navy's history. This naval exercise was scheduled to take place in the Barents Sea, in the icy North Atlantic Ocean from August 10th to 19. The main goal of the exercise was to test the readiness of the Kursk in the event of an unexpected war with the US or NATO. The Kursk was set to be the star of Summer X. It was scheduled to launch a bombardment of torpedoes at a target ship on August 10th. After 2 days of successful tests, on August 12th, Summer X would come to an abrupt end in the most shocking way possible. August 12th, the day of the disaster. At about 9 a.m. on August 12th, commander of the Russian Northern Fleet, Vyacheslav Alexeyevich Popov, radioed the Kursk to start the test and prepare to fire the dummy torpedo at the test target. Minutes later, the Kursk responded, saying that it had departed from its home port of Severomorsk, Russia, heading for the Barents Sea. That was the last time the Kursk radioed anyone. 2.5 hours later, at around 11:30 a.m., the sound of a loud explosion was picked up by the SS Memphis, an American submarine that, unbeknownst to the Russians, was secretly monitoring Summer X in the North Atlantic Ocean. The first explosion was followed by a much larger explosion. According to reports from the SS Memphis, the second explosion was 250 times more powerful than the first, and it was equivalent to 7 tons of TNT being exploded simultaneously. Both of the explosions sent shockwaves across the test area. Karelia, another Russian submarine, was also monitoring the exercise, and it too felt the shockwaves. Upon hearing the explosion, crew members on Karelia tried to communicate with Kursk, but there was radio silence. In a state of panic, they contacted Popov, the last man to communicate with the Kursk. But Popov wasn't overly concerned. He was a Navy veteran, used to seeing communications equipment break down. But as time passed and the Kursk maintained radio silence, his concern grew. Popov sent a helicopter to check if the submarine had surfaced. It had not. Concerns grew, and a search and rescue operation was finally established, several hours after the 2 explosions were reported. 2 aircraft were dispatched, but they found nothing as the weather grew stormy and hampered all search efforts. A state of emergency. The Northern Fleet declared an emergency around 12 hours after the explosions. At 10:30 p.m., Summer X was officially concluded, and 20 ships manned with over 3,000 sailors were deployed to join the search for the Kursk. The following morning, it was concluded that the Kursk was on the seabed. However, the status of its crew remained uncertain. There were rumors of a collision, but it was unclear what exactly had collided with the Kursk. The U.S. Department of Defense was quick to deny any involvement. Despite the gravity of the situation, Russian officials publicly claimed that Summer X was going as planned, keeping the truth hidden from the masses. It wasn't until Monday, 48 hours after the Kursk exploded, that they admitted the Kursk was in trouble. Still, the families of the crew members weren't given any news of an explosion. They were simply told that the Kursk hadn't surfaced on time, and that the men on the submarine had enough air to survive until the 18th. As other countries caught wind of the incident, they offered assistance. However, Russia aborted all external efforts to reach the submarine, accepting no outside assistance. After much hesitance, the British and Norwegians were finally allowed to join the search for the Kursk a week later. On August 19th, the Norwegian ship Norman Pioneer arrived on scene, carrying the British rescue submarine LR-5. 2 days later, on August 21st, a Norwegian rescuer finally reached the Kursk. He opened the upper door of an emergency hatch on the submarine. He saw no people in the airlock. At 1 p.m., more divers joined him, and the main hatch of the Kursk's airlock was finally opened. What they saw next shocked them to their core. The submarine was completely flooded. As they opened one compartment after another, they found dead bodies scattered everywhere. There was no sign of life inside the Kursk. 9 days after Admiral Popov radioed to the Kursk for the last time, it was time to accept the truth. Every crew member was dead. At 9 p.m. on August 21st, he officially reported the death of all 118 crew members. Popov appeared on Russian TV and told the cameras, "Forgive me for not saving your sailors." What happened? The submarine wreckage was finally recovered in 2001. Soon, a Russian Navy inquiry revealed exactly what happened to the Kursk on that fateful day. Like many torpedoes, the 900-pound torpedoes on board the Kursk used hydrogen peroxide as underwater fuel. One of these super heavyweight torpedoes on the Kursk had started leaking hydrogen peroxide as soon as it took off on August 12th. This leak was probably caused by a faulty weld, and it had triggered a fire. This fire detonated one of the torpedoes, causing the first explosion. Subsequently, 7 other torpedoes on board also exploded. According to the Navy Times, 95 of the sailors were killed instantly when the hull ruptured after the second explosion. The submarine was flooded completely, but 23 sailors managed to escape the explosion. They held on for their lives in non-flooded parts of the vessel, but even that was not enough. Hours later, they eventually suffocated. The Russian Navy hadn't even acknowledged the blast when the last crew members of the Kursk perished. They were a week too late in their rescue efforts. The aftermath. The only surviving notes from the Kursk were found in compartment 9. In those notes, Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov had written, "There was an explosion in the torpedo compartment which was supposed to be used to carry out the tests. It's 13:15. 23 people are here. We feel weakened by carbon dioxide. Pressure is increasing in our compartment." It's suspected that 6 hours after writing these notes, Lieutenant Kolesnikov and all the surviving crew members ran out of oxygen, dying a slow and painful death, suffocating in the darkness. The Russian media and the families of the victims, who were kept in the dark for several days after the incident, had many unanswered questions, with the main one being, how could a state-of-the-art nuclear submarine get so easily destroyed by a practice torpedo? To quell the outrage, Russian officials kept peddling misinformation about foreign involvement. Deputy Prime Minister Ilya Klebanov claimed that a foreign submarine had collided with the Kursk. All of these claims were ultimately dismissed by President Vladimir Putin. Klebanov was fired. Igor Sergeyev resigned as Minister of Defense. The Northern Russian fleet was made to admit that several mistakes had been made, and its chief Popov was transferred. 12 other high-ranking military officers lost their jobs. A few years later, then Vice Admiral Valery Ryazantsev finally spilled all the beans regarding the incident. The men on the Kursk were poorly trained. The Kursk itself was poorly maintained. The sub hadn't fired a torpedo for 3 years since the fateful day. All of these mistakes combined to trigger the deadly explosions on August 12th. Conclusion: a deadly dance. Any nation that relies on the military must continually showcase its military capabilities, often through expensive and risky demonstrations involving modern, ultra-deadly weapons systems. These weapons systems are inherently unsafe, and testing them without imposing a long list of fail-safe checks is like dancing with disaster. The Russian Navy engaged in this deadly dance, and 118 people had to pay the ultimate price. Their relentless and careless pursuit of military might was the main culprit behind the Kursk disaster. That's all for today. We would love to hear your opinion on the tragic tale of the Kursk submarine. So don't forget to comment your thoughts. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well. We'll see you in the next one.